Hello to everyone. I'm Swasti. I work as an associate fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses at New Delhi. And I closely follow and research on the politics, defense, security policies, etc., of Europe in the context of larger international relations today. So today I'm going to be talking about yet another dimension of, and I would say a very major one at that, of the Russia-Ukraine war, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. And as you know that NATO has been expanding, and that has been cited as one of the reasons by Putin, to start this war. But again, what we have seen is that after 5 months, actually more countries and very important countries in Europe have joined the NATO instead of getting, I would say, scared or wary of Putin's actions in Ukraine. So that is a very interesting phenomenon which is happening right now. It is also fairly dangerous in many ways because then, I'll today explain how it enhances the risk of a global nuclear conflict, and there's much more. So, like I said, that loud and low reverberations of Russia-Ukraine war continue to permeate the reorientation of global security architecture. And most notably, that of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or the NATO. It is interesting to note that while Russian President Vladimir Putin sought Finlandization of Ukraine, okay, 5 months into that pursuit, he has achieved quite the opposite. That is, NATO-ization of Europe. For decades, two Nordic nations, there are 5 Nordic nations: Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. Out of these five, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland have already been NATO members, but Sweden and Finland weren't NATO members. In fact, Sweden and Finland have famously been militarily neutral because they are neighbors to Russia, and they thought that the best way to accommodate, this formidable neighbor is to just follow a policy of military neutrality. So for decades, these two Nordic nations chose to maintain their military neutrality, and like I said, to accommodate their formidable neighbor with whom, they've also had wars, especially Finland, in the past. But other states in Central and East European region went about seeking security guarantees against Russia by joining NATO. So all the other countries in Central and Eastern Europe went on, joining the NATO, but these two chose to be, militarily neutral. This interesting metamorphosis into, what I call a forward posturing of the two militarily advanced but hitherto neutral Nordic states is brimming with realities waiting to be uncovered. It also entails grave security concerns now that Russia would have to rebalance the situation with an ever-increasing possibility of a nuclear world war. Why? Because now with Sweden and Finland joining, the attention shifts to a region called the Kola Peninsula, where Moscow houses its submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and a lot of them. So with increased military deployments, the chances for miscalculation have dangerously increased as well. Now, let me tell you a little bit about why the geography of that region is so important. Why is it so that Sweden or Finland joining the NATO is going to have such grave implications, of some of them I just mentioned? You see, until now, Norway was the only country that had NATO's border with Russia, which was north of the Kola Peninsula. And that border was hardly 200 kilometers, I think 197 kilometers to be exact. So that's hardly anything. It's a very, very small border. But that geography has fundamentally been altered to NATO's advantage. You know how? Because now the Finnish border, which is 1,335 kilometers, so 1,300 kilometers have been added to the eastern flank. So the entire length of the forest, lake, and marshland dense Finnish border with Russia is the new NATO border. So NATO-Russia conflict, with its potential for nuclear escalation, could be a recipe for global devastation. Like I said, the Kola Peninsula is so close now. So why, and that's not all, while the border with Finland throws land challenges to Russia, the strategically important Swedish island of Gotland, located in the center of the Baltic Sea, throws maritime challenges. With NATO's likely naval deployments in this region, Russia's Baltic Sea headquarters at Kaliningrad and a city as important and famous as St. Petersburg become vulnerable. In fact, Russia's sea lanes of communications leading to the West will now be a part of NATO waters. So, Finnish and Swedish membership of NATO would not only enhance the defense of the Baltic region, but also that of the Arctic and reduce the chances of Russian adventurism or attack across air, land, and sea domains in an integrated manner. Now, if you remember, recently there was a NATO summit which was held in Madrid, and that summit was called Transformative. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg didn't mince words at Madrid while describing NATO's military redeployment. The alliance has expanded its high readiness forces from 40,000 troops to now well over 300,000 troops in response to Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine. So, what does this mean for Russia and for transforming the stability of a European order, or shall I say, the disorder? So this threat, now that there's been such a humongous increase in the number of troops deployed, this threat would require Russia to add countermeasures against increasing potential threats by NATO. And Moscow is likely to spread its resources thin while trying to achieve air dominance. But if you look at it from a different perspective, it could also provide Putin with a fresh reason to redirect Russian resources towards more military preparedness under a recalibrated, broader strategic calculus. It would be naive to imagine, and I've been saying that for a long time, that it sounds rather naive to imagine that Putin had not factored in the possibility of the two Nordic states joining the bloc. Perhaps NATO's Nordic expansion would provide Putin with a valid opportunity to realign his forces to different regions and increase Russia's defense posturing, reasserting his original claim about NATO's expansion being an existential threat to Russia's survival. So, it's not just the military redeployment and enhanced military posturing that is coming from the West. Now that gives a reason to Putin to further his own military preparedness and transfer and reallocate all those resources from the Russian state again to military modernization. So there could also be a marked increase in gray zone operations, such as cyber attacks from Russia, and a perpetual instability below threshold levels. When I say below threshold levels, I say that gray zone measures mean that there will always be an instability, but there would not be a full-fledged war. So that is a very, very problematic situation. So since we are discussing Sweden and Finland and their membership, let me also tell you that the Sweden and Finland, as two countries, they also bring a lot to the table, for NATO, actually. This accession, which is in the process right now, it has not really come overnight. Despite official neutrality, like I mentioned when I began, this particular presentation, despite official neutrality, the two Nordic countries have been close NATO partners for decades, and they have worked on joint missions together again for decades. You see, we have to remember that not all NATO members are equal. In fact, I'm not sure, how many people sort of delve on this, but most members spend less than 2% of GDP commitments while relying on NATO for their safety guarantees. Let me give you an example. So the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, now they are very keen and very resolute NATO members. Lithuania has been in news, recently for standing up against Russia, etc. But let's also understand that they're also difficult to defend for NATO because they are wedged between Russia, its ally Belarus, and Russia's military exclave on the Baltic Sea, which is Kaliningrad. So Baltic states' defense has been repeatedly identified as NATO's preeminent military challenge. Swedish and Finnish NATO membership would transform the security landscape of the Baltics by opening a two-pronged military challenge for Russia. Like I was explaining, so there's going to be a land challenge as well as maritime challenge. Although Sweden has yet to reach the 2% threshold, both countries have dramatically increased their defense spending over the last decade. And by that criteria, they would become reliable security contributors to the bloc. And that is again not all, because Sweden and Finland actually also help to complement NATO's shortfalls in the region. NATO does not have sufficient vehicle-mounted air defense systems, and its air defenses, especially in the east, and we are talking about the eastern flank, right? We are talking about the border, the NATO's borders with Russia. So especially in the eastern flank, NATO's air defenses are fairly weak. And NATO has been attempting to address this shortfall, this capabilities shortfall for a long time. So Sweden has recently purchased surface-to-air launched cruise missiles, and Finland has purchased 64 cutting-edge F-35 fighter jets from the US. And these purchases, and with this, the way they sort of all that they bring, on the table for NATO, this would significantly improve NATO's air defense and attack capabilities along the eastern flank. Not just that, about 1,500 artillery and rocket systems is also something that Finland has, and which makes Finland one of Europe's strongest artillery forces, and especially, in a way which is crucial to modern warfare. So this is about what is happening there. Now, let us see what are the global implications, of these two members, coming to NATO. In times to come, these two countries, Sweden and Finland, could actually fundamentally transform NATO's security provider role in Europe, and could also enable the United States to leave European security to militarily strong European actors while retaining its nuclear umbrella. So, there's so much thing of, Europe being reliant on US for its security. One of the reasons being that there aren't many militarily strong European powers in the bloc yet. But when you talk about Sweden and Finland, now you're talking about two extremely powerful and militarily powerful countries that have come in the bloc. So that is going to leave some room for US to also think about other things in the world. And one of those things is its Indo-Pacific policy. So it will provide, in times to come, slowly and steadily, it will provide US with a window to focus on arch rival China in the Indo-Pacific and coordinate its strategies with allies like India. So it's not just the US that seeks enhanced freedom of maneuver. Even the United Kingdom, France, and other Indo-Pacific enthusiasts, they also look forward to playing a more pronounced role in the region as their resources would free up, especially after Germany ramps up military spending in a major policy shift. So the argument is the same, right? Ambitious plans are likely to lose steam due to a resource crunch in a post-pandemic, war-fatigued world, unless resources are judiciously redistributed. So while all this is good news for India, which is fundamentally wary of an Asian order, which is led by China, it also opens a plethora of foreign policy intersections that New Delhi will have to tread with caution. Beyond taking sides in Europe's war, like India has very, I would say, intelligently and strategically, wisely not taken sides in a war which we have nothing to do with, and we have always kept our, national interests first. And India's way has been to, our strategic calculus has been to prioritize, balancing major powers to our national interest. And that has been the best policy, to have so far. But what happens is that with the US and Europe-led initiatives playing a more pronounced role in the Indo-Pacific, the fault lines of a faraway Europe are likely to reflect in the Indian maritime backyard sooner than later. So this entire position of India not taking sides because Europe is so far away and it's a war that we have nothing to do with might have to we might have to recalibrate the strategy if those fault lines start to reflect in our own maritime backyard. So this is something that only time can tell. Until next time.